The Rosie and Bill Show wish to thank our primary sponsors. The Mallon Agency, located in Springfield, PA, where they take pride in exceeding expectations every time. Anthony DeCecco and our friends at Tennis Addiction are ready to serve all your tennis needs at their beautiful facility in Exton, PA. Welcome everyone to the Rosie and Bill Show. Our guest this week first caught my ear back in the 90s when he was cranking out hit after hit on the radio. He caught my eye with his great live performances and music videos, as well as his mastery of the fretboard on the guitar. But most of all, what impressed me was his ability to overcome adversity and against overwhelming odds, make the ultimate comeback, not once, but twice. Please welcome to the Rosie and Bill Show, Wade Hayes. Wade, welcome to the show.
Hello, thank you. I'm glad to be here.
We're really happy to have you here, Wade, and we've been looking forward to it. I have a question for you because I know your father was a musician.
Yes.
But I understand back in college, you weren't sure you wanted to take that career path until you saw the CMA Awards one night. What happened at the CMA Awards that influenced your decision?
Rosie, that is exactly right. And I love to tell this story even to this day because it's still, true, holds true. And I think other people need to hear it as well. But as you'd mentioned, I'd been through 4 years of college and was just trying my best just to survive. I hated it. And I'd been there 4 years and made it barely on scholarships and grants and student loans and anything you could think of, and just knew I didn't want to be there, and I loved music, but and I knew that it meant a lot to me, but I was afraid to pursue it. But like you'd said, I was watching the CMA Awards, I believe it was 92, and Ricky Skaggs comes on and says these words that changed my life. He said, all you young artists or entertainers out there that are struggling, you need to stick with it because that's what you're called to do. And I felt like he was speaking directly to me. And I started making preparations the very next day to move to Nashville. I felt like I had my answer. I'd been struggling and praying and wondering what to do. And I got my answer. And thank goodness I did that. It all worked out.
Well, I do believe that God talks through others to reach us.
Oh, I have no doubt that's where that direction came from.
Yeah, and it's also a great way that you followed that direction because, a lot of people back then, that's right around the time I was getting into country music. So I believe I watched that night as well.
Yeah.
But not everybody acts on it. So kudos to you for doing that. And then you make that move, and early in your career, you're kind of burning the candle at both ends, if you will.
Yeah.
You're playing at night, playing guitar with Johnny Lee.
Yes.
You're getting up early in the morning and working construction. And first of all, I'm not quite sure how you were able to do that, but at least it kind of helped inspire a song that maybe came out a little bit after that, didn't it?
You're exactly right. And, I look back on that part of my life, and it was so exciting and new. Everything was exciting. And like you said, I grew up building houses with my dad. He was a contractor. So naturally, that's what immediately when I moved to Nashville, I got a job doing that. And I also got a job playing lead guitar for Johnny Lee almost immediately as well. And it was a very difficult time, because Johnny would get wound up and he would want to play all night long. It was nothing for us to be, playing till 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning. And he, but it was great. And he did not care that I had to be at work at 7 o'clock the next morning swinging a hammer. And that was, like I said, it was a very difficult time, but it was one of the best times of my entire life. I loved it. And a pretty good song, or I say a song that kind of got everything going for me, came out of that situation. Old Enough to Know Better was inspired by that time of my life.
Yeah, the first time I heard it, on the radio, I remember thinking, oh, this is going to the top of the charts. There were a few songs back then that I would hear, and
Yeah.
I was like, okay, this, I remember, I Like It, I Love It, Tim McGraw,
Oh yeah.
Old Enough to Know Better. These are going places. And I'm
Oh,
wondering, when you recorded it, did you kind of have that feeling, or did you know when you were done recording it that you had something special there?
well, oddly enough, you said that, I knew when, see, we didn't even have a demo on that song. I had just written those songs with my mentor, Chick Raines. And we just went into the studio with an acoustic guitar, and I played this for all the studio guys. And then the fiddle player, Rob Hadjakis, I heard him doing that fiddle lick out in the we were in the control room and they were out in the studio, and I literally went running down the hall and I said, "That's it. We've got to have that." And I knew when we started that song and that fiddle came in, and that slamming drum at the front of it, I said, I knew that we had something special. I didn't know exactly how special, but it was a multi-week #1 song, and it was such a blessing, and I'm so thankful for that.
I'm just curious what that's like. I mean, you were a young man, and following that, you had 3 more top 10 hits. You're
Yeah.
album certified gold. Can you even describe what that feeling was like to accomplish that at such a young age?
Well, I will say, first of all, I was too young for that to happen. And looking back on that, I came from a very small town, and it was a sheltered childhood. And we were country kids, a very small community, and I'd never seen anything. I had maybe been out of the state of Oklahoma 3 times in my entire life before I moved to Nashville. And for all of this to be happening was too much, and it was too much to absorb. And it really, looking back on it now, I wish that it would have gone a little bit slower at the start of it, because it was for a naive country boy, it was too much. And it was but it was, the most incredible time of my life, and I was very thankful for it. And I still, looking back on it, we were just talking about this earlier, it just seems almost unreal that, having come from where I did in very meager beginnings, we didn't have much at all. And for all of this to be happening all at once, and hanging out with people that I had seen their names on records that I'd purchased, and now I'm getting to hang out with these people and make music with them, was just incredible. It was a dream come true.
Well, what kind of impact did that have on you? I'm curious because you're now hanging out with maybe some of your idols. Did
Yeah.
it go to your head, or did you just feel like, oh my gosh, how do I follow this up? What was the thought process?
All of it was how do I, where do I go from here? And it's very difficult to hold on to. It was more difficult to hold on than to achieve it. But I was hanging out with people that I grew up listening to, and I'm getting to play shows with Brooks and Dunn, Tracy Lawrence, Waylon Jennings, Willie Nelson, people I idolized. And I'm getting to hang out in the same room and talk to them like, I would my best buddy. It was really incredible. And looking back on it, it was such a wonderful time. And like you'd mentioned, it was so much, and I don't think it ever went to my head. I always felt like I was going to be caught being an imposter,
Mm.
because I didn't feel like I was not in these people's class. I never felt like I was. And I knew that I was there with them, and I had hits on the radio, but I never felt like I was in their same class, and I still don't to this day, but it was, very thankful to have had that experience.
Wade, I have to tell you, you're not the first person that we've heard kind of say that.
Really?
We've even heard people say they felt like an imposter
Yeah.
in certain situations. So it is interesting, but I also have found that the people who say that are about as far from an imposter as you could get, and you really do belong. And I commend you, though, for having that humility and just respect for the situation that you had. And you mentioned something just a minute ago that I'd like to pick up on, because you kind of touched on how it was, it's hard to get there, but even harder to hold on to.
Yes.
And I was thinking about, you put out, as Rosie said, all those top 10 singles off the first album.
Mhm.
And I remember back then in the 90s when that was really country music's probably biggest time ever, in
Yes.
terms of popularity, sales, everything. So I'm wondering, was there pressure from the record company to say, okay, let's come out with another one with 3 or 4 big singles on it. Let's get it out like yesterday. And if so, how did that maybe impact the creative process and all that goes into it?
It's as if you were being able to tap my telephone from that time. Everything you just said was completely accurate. The pressure was unbelievable
Mm.
to get the next record out right now. And before we were even ready, we weren't anywhere near ready to get the sophomore project out, but the pressure to have it out was immense. And I think all of that comes into play. And plus, you've got personnel changes at your record label that, people that made the magic on that first project were all starting to go other places, and there was, turmoil at the label. And then all this pressure to have this second record out, and it all came into play. And we had, the second album went gold as well, but we weren't ready to have it out, and it was always a pressure situation from then on. It was very, very difficult to match what we did on that first record. There just wasn't enough time.
Yeah, I imagine that when you are working under those unnatural circumstances, because if you think about it, before your first album, you were working on inspiration. I'm not saying you didn't have deadlines, but there was more time to allow the creative process to happen. And your second one, then it's like, no, we got to do it. So I feel like that would impact kind of the integrity of what you're trying to do. And because if you start thinking of, oh, I've got to write a hit,
No.
as opposed to what am I feeling, what's in my heart.
Again, as if you were there and taking notes. Everything you're saying again is completely accurate. And plus, you've got the fact that you're touring now, and you've got everybody is wanting you to do this or that, and your record label, you're making appearances on radio stations every day, promoting whatever your next single is, and plus you're touring and staying up half the night, playing live shows. And it's unbelievable what you go through. And people that are able to achieve that next level of success and come on and go on to be huge stars, it's just, I commend them, because you have to have everything lined up in the right direction, and you have to have your poop in a group. And I'm telling you, there's no room for error. And the people that go on to that elite status, I commend them, because it is not easy.
We had a comedian on the show recently who was talking about the fact that it's hard to match your first show that you do, like for comedy, and in your case, your first album, because you had all these years building up to it where you were creating it. And then the second one, oh, you got to do it in a year, and it's hard to live up to that.
Yeah, and you don't have a minute to turn around, especially if you're a new act and you've got, all these obligations everywhere, and radio stations to visit, and promotional whatever. And plus find time to sit down and write a song is, for me, and I know there are people that can do it that are much better writers than I am. But for me, that was extremely difficult. And you've got to find time to listen to songs and try to find, outside material. And it's extremely difficult. There is so much more to it than people realize.
Well, and Wade, the other thing I think that was a factor, at least at that time frame, and I kind of mentioned before about how the 90s was just this huge period for country music. The competition was fierce, and Nashville can, chew people up and spit them out. And, again, I was a huge fan, and I'd be looking for the next album from somebody, and then I can't find them, and then they're not on the radio. But you managed to still you put out a third album, you changed record companies. And your career, over that next like decade, 15 years, you're still putting out great music. You go independent in 2009, touring. And then a couple years after that, talk about the ultimate curveball. You're touring and you're not feeling well, and
Yeah.
you go and have some, tests done, and
Mm.
like I said, ultimate curveball gets delivered to you. So can you talk with us about what happened at that point in 2011 and what that news that ultimately was shared with you was?
Yeah, I will absolutely be glad to. And I will, before I get into the story, I will tell you this. I feel like it's part of the gig now. The fact that my life was spared, and I'm still trying to figure out why, when so many other people that they weren't afforded that opportunity. And the fact that I'm still around is nothing short of a miracle. And I share my story because in the middle of all of the first time around with cancer. You're talking about my cancer diagnosis. In 2011, I was diagnosed with stage 4 colon cancer. And stage 4 just simply means it's metastasized or it's spread throughout your body. And I had it bad. And I had it about as bad as you can get it. And the first hospital that I was at was just going to put me in comfort care because I had it that bad. And Kix Brooks from the duo Brooks and Dunn, I was on tour with them for a couple of years, and he had heard through my producer, Don Cook, that I was sick and what was going on, and he got me into Vanderbilt. And they initially were going to put me in comfort care as well. And I didn't know this until just a couple of years ago, but a brilliant oncologist named Dr. Jordan Berlin got involved there, and he thought he saw a way to fight it. And so he literally fought for my life and convinced Vanderbilt to try and do surgeries and chemo and beat it. And they went along with him after he fought for my life, and we ended up, I was in and out of the hospital for about 3 years battling this stuff. But anyway, in the middle of the battle, where I'd been reading statistics and realized that I probably was not going to make it, and I met a man who had been diagnosed similar to me, and he was still alive. And Dr. Berlin introduced me to him for a reason. And I didn't realize it at the time. But meeting somebody who had actually beaten it, who had actually made it, when all the statistics were saying that I was not going to make it, seeing that it could be done and meeting somebody who had been there and beat it was a game changer. That allowed me to get right mentally and put my head down and fight. And that's the reason I share my story. And I'll tell everybody, anything they want to hear about it, because it makes a difference. Just hearing that it can be done, meeting somebody that has done it. And I will also say, and I thank God in the name of Jesus, because he made it painfully clear that he's the reason I made it through it. So that's the reason I share my story, and hopefully I can impact somebody the way it did me.
Can we clone Dr. Berlin? Because we could really use a few of him around here.
Hey, that guy is amazing. Let me tell you, I'm in my job, I meet a lot of people, and I certainly won't name any names, but think a lot of themselves because they're entertainers. But this man is the most humble person I've ever met in my life, and he is brilliant, and he saves people's lives for a living. That's what he does, and he's the most humble person I've ever, and I love him. I consider him a friend, and he is the biggest star to me, and I feel honored to know him. And yes, I think you said a mouthful. We could use a lot more of Dr. Berlin everywhere. He's an amazing individual.
In addition to all his other talents, Wade, he's kind of a songwriter too, because didn't he inspire a pretty awesome song?
Yes, that's exactly right. After, I'd been fighting this stuff a few years, and I'd been through it twice. And after the second round of surgeries and chemotherapies, um, we were sitting in his office and going over my latest blood work, and he says, and I'll clean it up because he's a colorful guy. But he says, "Hey, is this a big deal? You were stage 4, and now there's no evidence of the disease whatsoever." And he said, "You need to go live your life." And it hit me like a ton of bricks, because he was telling me two things I figured out. He was saying, first of all, this is a miracle. You made it. you need to go live your life. And he was also saying, you know, stage 4 has a tendency to come back. You need to go live your life. And so I'm not saying that I succeed every day. You know, this life is a struggle for me, just like it is everybody, but I certainly do try to take his words to heart. And I told my friend Bobby Pinson that, and we wrote that song, Go Live Your Life, from his exact words. And it ended up getting a big article done in Billboard magazine about it. And a pharmaceutical company ended up using that, my story and part of that song, for a big campaign.
So go live your life, go chase your dreams. We got no way of knowing what tomorrow brings. Swing for the fence, take that chance. Don't wake up one day to see it's passed you by. Go live your life, it got down to it, and I realized the truth. My regrets were not in what I'd done, but what I didn't do. So go live your life, go chase your dreams.
So it was a wonderful time, and it was a time in my life when definitely I felt the winds of change. You know, things were turning around for me finally after all these years of struggling, and you know, the 3 years I spent in and out of the hospital, I could tell things were changing finally, and it was a very welcome and wonderful time.
Well, God bless you, Wade. That's a lot to go through. And
It
I
was.
think God kept you around because he's got a message he wants to share through you.
Yeah. I
That
certainly,
song is beautiful.
well, I hope so, and I do, because you know I am I'm a human, and I'm rotten. You know, I can get on your nerves very easily. I promise you. But there are good parts of me too, and the good parts I want to share, and I want to help, and I sincerely want to help somebody because I've been there, and it is scary, you know, to realize there's a good chance you're not going to be around much longer, and to have to digest that and to deal with that. If I can help somebody in some way with those words, then you know, hopefully I'm doing my job. I want to help.
We understand that your furry friend named Jack also inspired a song. Can you talk to us about that?
That is the truth. And that dog, every word, okay, it's a story that, you know, all of these stories are intertwined as part of my life. And right before I found out I was sick, I had met this stray dog in the middle of the night. I was coming home, and I pulled into a filling station. It was probably midnight, and there was this mangy, rail thin little dog wandering around, and I left my truck door open to get gas, and I came back to my truck, and this dog was sitting in my front seat, and he had a pizza crust hanging out of his mouth. And I went in and talked to the people at the filling station. They said he'd been there about 3 days eating out of trash cans, and he looked rough. So I took that dog home and got him nursed back to health and got him fattened up, and he turned out to be the best dog I'd ever had in my life. And that dog was instrumental in helping me through my chemotherapy. You know, we would walk at least a mile every day. And I believe that dog was instrumental in me getting through it as well as I did. And so, you know, naturally, he was a big part of the healing process. And after I'd been through and was really back on my feet, I noticed on one of our walks that he'd missed a step. And the next day, the same thing. So I took him to the vet, and I found out that he had an incurable disease called degenerative myopathy, and I had less than a year left with him. There was nothing we could do. And I bawled like no grown man should bawl over a dog, because he was so dear to me, everything he'd done for me. And that dog was rotten. He was just like me. He's rotten. But I loved him. He was my dog and he helped me and I loved him. And so this song started coming out and I couldn't stop it. The song wrote itself because every word of it is true. And, you know, that dog, I know that he was grateful to me for taking him home and taking care of him. And I was grateful to him. He did a lot for me and I loved him. So that's, you know, that's the synopsis of that story.
And I love the title, Who Saved Who?
It's true. You know, that's exactly what our situation was. You know, I took that dog home and got him nursed back to health and he helped me heal up. So.
Yeah, and I will say this, just one last thing about that too, Wade, is the lyrics are incredible, and it's great to hear that they're, you know, every word's true, including the line about the pizza crust, which I remember.
Hey, and the fact that he smiled, that dog could smile on command. I swear to you, I've got video of him doing it. And when he was trying to be charming or get a treat, or he had done something wrong, he'd break out the smile, and all of a sudden he was no more trouble, or or he'd get a treat. It was hilarious.
Yeah, and it's also, for folks who maybe haven't seen it yet, one of the best music videos, one of the best songs and music videos I've ever seen. It really is. It's incredible. It's really
I appreciate that very much.
Yeah. Now, Wade, one other thing we definitely want to make sure that we talk about is your latest project.
Yeah.
And I have to say, the title track, I absolutely love the title track because to me, Old Country Still Rocks. It's got a vibe that kind of brings me back to some of your earlier material, kind of that 90s vibe to it.
Yes.
So I want to talk about that a little bit, but also what was the selection process like for all of these great covers that you recorded? So let's talk first about the title track, and then how did you go about whittling down and making those selections of all those great songs, including a former Pointer Sisters #1 hit?
Yes. Thank you for knowing that. I love that. But the title track was a song that I had written, and I'd known for a long time that I wanted to do a covers album. But when I wrote this song, and thank you for real, you know, that's a very 90s sounding record. That's exactly what we were trying to do. And I don't know that I'm smart enough to do anything but that. But we were aiming to do that with this record, and it is very 90s sounding. And after I'd written it, I knew what I wanted to do, but whittling it down to those songs was very difficult. I could have easily done 2 or 3 more records with the songs that I had picked out. And there are some people that I left off that were huge influences on me. The biggest one being Gary Stewart. He was a big influence on me, and I didn't do any Gary on this record, which I wish I would have, but we just had too many song selections, and every one of these songs has a special reason why it's there other than it just was an old, you know, country song. And there are some more obscure songs on there that people will not readily know, but there are some big hits on there as well. You'd mentioned the Conway Twitty song, and that is a song that I played with my dad in clubs 1,000,000 times. And I love that record that Conway did. The Pointer Sisters cover, Slow Hand, and that was a big record for Conway. And it was one of my favorites that we used to play in the honky tonks, my dad and I together. So that's the biggest reason it was on this record. But there are some more obscure things like a tune called Can't Break the Habit, which was a semi-hit from Merle Haggard. That's not a song that everybody would know, but it's a song that I loved from my childhood. And I love the picking on it. And just, it's really a jamming song. So that's the reason it's on there. And it's obscure.
Well, I love the fact that you played in the honky tonks with your father, and you have all these great memories that you're bringing to this next project.
Yeah. Well, you would think that that's not really probably the best situation for a 14-year-old to be in, which I'll admit, I saw some things a 14-year-old probably should not have seen and playing in these honky tonks. But I will say this, I never got in any trouble. My dad always knew where I was. I was with him on weekends, you know, when my friends were out running around, drinking beer, racing cars and whatever. I was in a honky tonk with my dad, learning how to play guitar and learning how country music worked. And so, I never gave him any trouble, and I kept my grades up. So, it might not have been the worst things.
No,
Yeah,
it sounds like it worked out quite well. You laid the track for your future,
Well, I'm thankful. I mentioned this earlier, feeling like I was out of my class when I was around these people I idolized, but I will be the first to admit that I am not the best singer or songwriter or player, but I genuinely love it. And I love to play, and I love to play lead guitar. I love to write songs, and I love to sing them. And I love the fact that, especially in this environment that we're all living in right now, this world is gotten so difficult for everybody. But if I'm on stage and I can see somebody smile or see them singing along with a song that I wrote and know that their mind isn't on their troubles for a moment, it helps me as much as it does them. And I love doing that for people. I love making them happy for a minute. And that's one of the biggest reasons I don't get involved politically with things, because that is not my job and it's not my wheelhouse. It is making people happy and entertaining them for a second. That's what I love to do.
Yeah, you definitely do it well. And one last quick thing I just want to throw out there was I was recently having a discussion with another friend who's a country music fan. And one of our most heated debates was who's a better guitar player, you or Brad Paisley? And I was going to the wall that you could outpick Brad. So I just wanted you to know that.
Well, my friend, I'll tell you what, I appreciate that very much, but I will tell you, Brad Paisley is a very, very skilled guitar player.
Mm-hmm.
He's gone through college, and I've got the mindset of, I'm a honky tonker, but Brad is a very skilled and learned guitar player, and I'm afraid he could pick circles around me. But
spoken by a true imposter.
No, hey, that guy he's incredible. He's really, really good, and he's a very intelligent guy too. So he's coming at it from that perspective, a learned, intelligent path to it.
You know what, though, Wade? I don't think it matters, because I think there's probably, and I don't know Brad, I've never met him, but I wouldn't be surprised to ever hear him say the same thing that you just said. There's an actual syndrome, the imposter syndrome. Yeah. A lot of great artists, singers, actors, experience it. So we never know.
Well, I appreciate you saying that, and I will definitely check into that. I've never heard that term.
Oh yeah.
Wow.
It's very well known, especially in acting. Well, people are afraid that other people are going to figure out they're not as good as they think they are.
You said a mouthful right there. Good grief.
Yeah.
And one last thing, Wade. I'll bet you Brad Paisley couldn't make a guitar out of a tree that fell down like you.
I may have him beat there.
Yeah.
I did grow up with that mindset of building things. I've been doing that my entire life, and I've bought and sold quite a few houses here in Nashville, and that's a side hustle that I enjoy very much, and I still have to do manual labor, or I'm afraid I would go completely crazy. So I have that I do, and I'm actually working on another guitar right now for a friend of mine down in Texas. So that's something I really, really enjoy. So yeah, take that, Brad.
That's awesome. Well, Wade, my gosh, the time goes by so fast. We love talking to you, and thank you for sharing your story with not only with us, but all of our viewers, because you never know who could benefit.
You're exactly right, Rosie. You're exactly right. And I hope some of the things we've talked about, it has the impact that I'm wanting them to have. And I appreciate you letting me share my story. And I've really enjoyed talking to you guys, and I appreciate you giving me the time.
Absolutely. And we thank you. You're so authentic, and we really appreciate you and look forward to hearing your next album when it comes out. And folks, we thank you for tuning in, and we'll see you next week.
When I first met him, he was digging through the trash. at an all-night filling station. He was looking for some scraps, and he was frail, like he'd been a while alone. He came to the truck, he jumped right in the front seat. He had a half-eaten pizza crust clamped in his crooked teeth, and he smiled like he was finally home. And he's been with me through hell and back again, and I know it's often said, but he has been my best friend. They call him a rescue, but I'm not sure that's true. 'Cause there's times I wonder who saved who. At first it was trying, 'cause he was still a pup. There's no telling how much furniture and shoes that he chewed up, but it was worth it. When we got through that first year, 'cause for dang near a decade he's been a constant in my life, and he helped pull me through what were my darkest times. And I know I'm sure thankful he was here, 'cause he's been with me through hell and back again. And I know it's often said, but he has been my best friend. They call him a rescue, but I'm not sure that's true. 'Cause there's times I wonder who saved who. All the roads we've ridden, all the miles that we've walked, and everything he's seen and heard, I'm sure glad he can't talk. I just hope and pray that he can stay at least another 10, 'cause I know I'm nowhere strong enough for life without him. 'Cause he's been with me through hell and back again, and I know it's often said, but that dog has been my best friend. They call him a rescue, but I'm not sure that's true. 'Cause there's times I wonder who saved who. Oh, Jack, I think I know just who saved who.
This week's episode has been brought to you by Doherty & Company Insurance Services for all your business and personal insurance needs. Our friends at Tennis Addiction in Exton, PA. And the Malin Agency, where exceeding expectations is how they do business. Interested in becoming a partner in positivity? Send us an email, rosieandbillshow2018 @gmail.com.